A very welcome to all the students. Today we are going to start with the unit of plant pathology, and the topic that we are going to cover today is introduction and classification of plant diseases. Now let us take a brief about what is plant pathology. For that we need to understand that what is pathology. So, pathology is actually derived from two Greek words, that is pathos, which means suffering, and logos, which means study. So, plant pathology is the study of the suffering or diseases of plants, and this study is also known as phytopathology because phyto itself means plants. And this study is actually a very important part of many branches like agricultural, botanical, or biological sciences. Why? It is because it gives an insight into the causes of diseases. We can know that what are the factors because of which the disease is happening. It also gives an insight into symptoms and signs of the diseases. So, once we know the causes, we can also identify the symptoms that are related to those causes. And if we know the causes and symptoms, we can also study the resulting losses because of these two. And once we know that because of these causes and symptoms there are a particular kind of losses happening, then we can identify the prevention and control of this diseases. So how can we prevent the diseases or how can we control the diseases can be identified. So this study of plant pathology deals with all of these four things, which gives us an insight into uh, disease caused to the plants. Also nowadays this plant pathology is totally a different branch that is studied, right? So now that we know that what is plant pathology, let us understand first that what is a healthy plant. So a healthy plant we think is actually the one that looks healthy, but a healthy plant or a normal plant, when a plant is considered normal or healthy, is when it can carry out its physiological functions or physiological processes to the best of its genetic potential. So, when an organism or a plant can carry out all of its physiological processes properly on a daily basis, only then the plant can be called a healthy plant. So what are these physiological processes or functions that the plant performs? These are photosynthesis, as we know, is the process of production of food by the plant. Respiration is where the plant respires. Plant hormone functions are hormones are responsible for so many other activities in the plant. Transpiration is the loss of water uh, through the leaves or through the stomata of the leaves, right? Reproduction is where the plant reproduces, right? It produces its own fruits and seeds, and from which the new plant will develop. And the process of translocation, that is the translocation of food, the food that gets prepared in the leaves have to reach to every part of the plant. And absorption, so absorption is the absorption of water by the roots, which should also reach to every part of the plant. So these are some of the main physiological functions which are very important for the plant to perform, to be called a healthy plant. Apart from these physiological functions, there are also many other physiological functions which we can list down. These are cell division or cell differentiation or cell development. So every cell divides and differentiates and develops into a mature cell. Photoperiodism, circadian rhythms, that is the timing, that is how the plant knows that it's time to give a flower or it's time for a leaf to come out. So these are called circadian rhythms of the plant or the tree. Seed germination, opening or closing of stomata, all of these are various kinds of physiological processes. Apart from this, there are many physiological processes that are related um, to a healthy plant, which is important for the plant to work properly. Only if these all physiological functions they work properly, then and then only the plant can be called a healthy plant, right? Now that you know what is a healthy plant, um, let us have a look into what is a diseased plant. So this brings us to our main topic, which is plant disease. So, as I said before, when all the physiological conditions, all the physiological processes, they function properly in a plant, that would be termed as a healthy plant. So, when there is any deviation from these physiological processes or when there is any deviation from these normal plant functions, this will lead to disease, and then therefore the plant can be called a diseased plant because it has deviated from its normal functions. Now that diseased plant is an unhealthy plant, that is, uh, disease has infested in it, the functions are not working properly. So an unhealthy plant will show all kind of symptoms. Now these symptoms can be it can be seen in the fruits, it can be seen in the leaves, it can be seen over the stem or the bark or any part of the plant separately, or sometimes over um, entire part of the plant. So when symptoms start appearing, that means that the plant is trying to convey that there is some problem inside. So now if these symptoms appear and still there are no steps taken, or if these things remain untreated, then this will lead to the death of the plant, due to which means that all of its physiological functions have stopped working, right? So this is about a diseased plant. Now, um, Steckman and Harrer in 1957 um, defined plant disease as a physiological disorder or any structural abnormality that is deleterious to the plant. So, physiological disorder, that means that the plant has some disorder in its physiological functions, or there are any structural abnormalities, that means you can see changes in its structure, and these are deleterious to the plant, that is, it is causing harm or damage to the plant or its part or product, that reduces the economic value of the plant. So it can either cause damage to the whole plant or to the part or product of the plant, which then leads to the reduction of its economic value, that means its value in the market decreases. This is a definition described by Steckman and Harrer. There are many more definitions given by various scientists, but for our understanding in simple terms, we define disease as the process in which the pathogen, that is, the organism causing disease, interferes with the essential cell functions. So these organisms they interfere with the cell functions of the plant, which leads to abnormalities in their structure, and these abnormalities are visible as symptoms. So this is disease, and this is true in cases of even human beings or any organisms. When the inner physiological functions are not good, when there is something wrong inside the body, so the symptoms will appear outside the body also. Same is in the case of plants too, right? So now that we know what is plant disease, we move to our next topic, which is disease triangle. Disease triangle is a hypothetical model which is made to give an understanding regarding what are the requirement for a disease to happen. So disease triangle has three main requirements. So these are pathogen, susceptible host, and a favorable environment. Now, what is pathogen? Pathogen are organisms like fungi and bacteria or viruses. These are organisms that will infect the plant, right? So, pathogen are all those organisms that are going to um, form infections in the plant. Then, what is susceptible host? Susceptible host or host is the plant that will be infected by the pathogen. So, pathogen is going to infect a plant. That plant is called host plant, which is going to host the pathogen, right? So, it is a susceptible host. That means the host must be able to um, take in the pathogen, so that is susceptible host. And the third is the favorable environment. That means the environment surrounding should also be favorable to the pathogen to enter into the plant. So these are the three important three important part of a disease triangle. Now um, if we look into pathogen, we can see that when only pathogen is present, then there will be no disease. That means that for a disease to happen, if there is only pathogen, the disease is not going to happen. Similarly, if there is only host present, this green part is for host, this brown is for pathogen, right? So if there is only host present, then also there will be no disease, right? And similarly, if there will be only favorable environment, so also there will be no disease, right? So this transparent brown part is of only pathogen, that is there will be no disease if only pathogen is present. This transparent green part is only for susceptible host, that means if only susceptible host is present, there will be no disease. Similarly, this light yellow part is showing a favorable environment alone. So if alone favorable environment is present, then also there will be no disease. Similarly, even if two of these are present, for example pathogen is present and susceptible host is present. For example, there is some fungal species um, that has its spores, right? It spreads through spores. So if there are spores present, the pathogen present, and if there is also susceptible host, for example there is some plant present, so both are present, but there is no favorable environment, then also there will be no disease. So this intersection shows that the pathogen and susceptible host is present, both of these are intersecting, but the favorable environment is not coming in. So when the pathogen will not get a favorable environment, then also there will be no disease, though there may be the presence of susceptible host. Now similarly, there will be no disease if there is susceptible host and favorable environment present. So here also there will be no disease, though the susceptible host, that is the plant on which the pathogen will infect, that is present, and also the favorable environment is there, but then pathogen is not present. So this intersecting part shows that there is susceptible host and favorable environment intersecting, but there is no pathogen coming in. So when there is no pathogen but there is susceptible host and favorable environment, then there would be again no disease. Similarly, when these two factors will be present, that is pathogen and favorable environment, the pathogen has the favorable environment but there is no susceptible host. So when there is no susceptible host, again there would be no disease. So this means that each of these three factors, that is pathogen, susceptible host and favorable environment, when present alone cannot cause disease. When any two of these three present, then also these cannot cause disease, right? But when disease will be caused, when there will be an intersection of all of these three, when there is susceptible host also present, pathogen also present and favorable environment also present, then there will be disease. So for a disease to happen, there should be a susceptible host. The host should be susceptible, that is the host should be able to accept the pathogen. That is, the pathogen should be able to enter into the host. There should be presence of pathogen which should be virulent, that is pathogen should be active so that it can enter into the host. And there should be a favorable environment present. So if favorable environment would be present, the pathogen would be able to enter inside the host. So these three are the prerequisites for a disease to happen. Only if these three are present together, then only disease will take place. um, and disease will not take place if any one of these is present or if any two of these is present. Only when all of these three are present, disease is going to happen. So this is called disease triangle. Okay, so now that you know about plant pathology, what is a healthy plant, what is a diseased plant, and what is disease triangle, that is, what are the requirements for disease to happen, we move to our next topic, which is classification of plant diseases. Right. So, plant diseases are can be classified into many types. Uh, there are various criterias based on which plant diseases can be classified. We consider each of these criteria one after the another. So, the very first classification of plant diseases that we are going to study today is based on the type of causal agents, that is, what are the agents that are actually causing the plant disease. So, these are of two types: infectious disease and non infectious disease. Infectious disease, as the name itself suggests, that the disease can cause infections, right? So this disease is caused by pathogens, that is, it is caused by biotic factors. So all the pathogens like bacteria, fungi, viruses, all of this can cause infectious diseases. So since they are caused by pathogen or biotic factors, these are transmitted from one to another. So these pathogen can be transmitted from one plant, from a diseased plant to a plant that is normally healthy. So this is an infectious disease, that is, the disease is going to spread. Now this infectious disease can again be classified into parasitic infectious disease and virus borne infectious disease. So parasite, as we know, these live on the host plant, and by living on the host plant it takes all of the nourishment of the host plant, and this leads to the death of the plant. So such kind of parasites that cause plant to die are fungi, bacteria, some kinds of insects, and all. These are called parasitic infectious organisms, and the disease that they cause is called parasitic infectious disease. Now, viruses have been kept in a separate section because though viruses are obligate parasites, they require a host cell to survive, but they lack their own metabolic machinery. They do not have any machinery to generate their own energy, so they cannot generate their own energy, they cannot make their own protein, so they require the machinery of other cell to multiply. So viruses are different than these parasites in the fact that all of these they have their own metabolic machinery, but viruses do not have their own metabolic machinery. Though they are obligate parasites, they have been kept here in a separate group, right? So then we talk about what is non-infectious diseases. In contrary to what is infectious diseases, non-infectious diseases are caused by abiotic factors, that is non-living factors. This was caused by living factors, and so it was infectious. Now this is caused by abiotic factors, right, and hence it is not transmitted. This cannot be transmitted because there is no biotic factor involved in it. So the abiotic factors that are involved could be unfavorable temperature. Maybe the plant might not be getting a proper temperature. There would be deviations in temperature. Maybe the plant is not able to get proper moisture, proper pH, proper oxygen conditions, right? Or there can be deficiencies in minerals like sodium, calcium, potassium, right? So all of these are all abiotic factors, and all of these abiotic factors can also lead to disease. But very important point that these cannot be transmitted further, right? So these are some of the abiotic factors that have been shown here. It could be air, salinity level, right, that is the salt level, soil, temperature, light, water, minerals, pH, humidity. So there could be many other abiotic factors, but these are some of them, and due to this the plant may get diseased, but this cannot be transmitted because there is no biotic factor involved in it, right? So this is one kind of classification which is based on the type of causal agents. Now we move towards another type of classification which is based on the occurrence and geographical distribution. So let us have a look into what are these types. That is endemic, second is epidemic or epiphytotic, pandemic, or sporadic, right? So this is on the basis of geographical distribution, that is the disease will happen in which areas, what kind of area, or how much area it will infect. Based on that the plant disease is classified over here. These are, so first of all, in endemic, it repeats only in a particular place constantly. That means that this disease is going to infect plants only in a particular area. Say for example, there is a wart disease in Darjeeling, a wart disease of potato in Darjeeling. Now, this wart disease actually happens only in Darjeeling and nowhere else. So, there are warts present over the surface of the potato, right? So, therefore, it is known as wart disease of potato, and this is only observed in Darjeeling. Endemic, that means it will happen only in Darjeeling and nowhere else in the country. So, it is endemic to a particular area. Now let us see what is epidemic then. Epidemic occurs periodically in severe state involving major areas of crop. So this happens periodically, which means after sometimes it keeps on repeating in severe state, that is that its infections are severe, involving major area of crop. So wherever crop is present, it will infect most of the crops, right? What happens in epidemic or epiphytotic plant disease is that pathogens are already present in the locality. Wherever crop is present, the pathogen is present there already, but pathogen is not infecting the plant unless and until it gets a favorable condition. So as and when favorable condition for disease development is available, the pathogen will start developing. So that favorable condition could be a moist condition, could be a rainy condition. When the pathogen starts getting that favorable condition, the pathogens present in the locality will become active and it will infect the plant. So this favorable condition of disease development is periodic. So this favorable condition might not be available to the pathogen all the time, and therefore it is mentioned that it is periodic. Some examples of these are most of the rust diseases, late blights, and mildews. Right? So, an example of this is an example of late blight of potato, which is a epidemic disease. That is, the pathogens are already present near the crop in the locality, but it will only start its infection cycle once it gets its favorable conditions. Now, coming to our next point, third type, which is pandemic. Pandemic occurs in vast and most areas. That is, it will infect a large, huge area. Maybe it can also be present all over the world. I think pandemic term now everybody knows because we are ourselves passing through this pandemic um, of coronavirus, right? So we all know what is pandemic. It is when it spreads all over the world, then it is known as pandemic. Or if it spreads all over a country altogether or all over a larger area, then it is called pandemic, right? So an example of pandemic itself is late blight of potato, right? Late blight of potato is a pandemic also, and it is an epidemic also, right? So that means that late blight of potato has spread over large areas of the world, right? So this is an example of pandemic. Next type is sporadic. So, sporadic means that it occurs at irregular intervals. Now, this kind of disease takes place at irregular interval and at small areas. So, this is not very distinct, but it happens at small areas sometimes and at irregular intervals. So, this is called sporadic. Now, a particular disease can also be epidemic, it can also be pandemic, right? So it depends that what kind of disease it is, and based on that it can be sometimes endemic, maybe epidemic, or maybe pandemic, right? As we saw in the case of late blight of potato. Now sporadic can also be, we can also say that sporadic is just a starting stage of epidemic, where you can see infections in smaller areas, but we can say that later on the sporadic can also become epidemic or pandemic, right? So these are the certain classifications of plant diseases. Now we move towards our next criteria of plant disease, which is on the basis of natural perpetuation and mode of infection. That is, what is the mode of infection by which the plant disease will happen. So these could be soil borne disease, airborne disease, and seed borne disease. So as the name itself suggests, here the pathogen are already surviving in the soil. So when it gets the favorable condition, it will infect the plant, right? So this is soil borne disease. whatever the pathogen is, say for example fungi, all of its spores are already present in the soil, but it originates from soil. But when favorable conditions are not available, it will remain dormant in the soil. But as soon as it will get favorable condition, it will um, start infecting the plant. It will start entering the plant from the soil, and therefore it is known as soil borne disease. Now, then what is airborne disease? It spreads through air and it attacks the plants. So these, for example, some spores, they may be present in air, and by air it will settle over the plant, and from there, when it settles over the leaf, it will get inside the plant. So this is airborne disease. Similarly, there are seed-borne disease, that is the microorganisms are carried along with seeds. Once the microorganism has entered seed of a plant, this seed when taken to another location infects, starts the process of infection by infecting the plant, and then from one plant to another plant. So these are the three types of plant diseases on the basis of natural perpetuation and mode of infection. Now, let us look into another type of bifurcation, which is on the basis of extent to which a plant gets affected by disease. That is, the plant gets affected in how much part, in how much area. On the basis of this, it can be divided into two part. This is localized and systemic. So it could be a localized plant disease, or it could be a systemic or systematic plant disease. So what happens in a localized plant disease? That the disease is limited to a small area of plant. Say for example, as shown in the figure, here is a plant where you can see that there are brown patches, right, over all the leaves. So that means that this particular disease is caused or is infected only over the leaves, and that too on certain spots. So this is localized. Now this may not happen in the stem of the plant, or this may not happen in any other part of the plant, for example like root. So this is localized, limited to a small area of plant. Then what is systemic? Systemic or systematic is where the pathogen spread throughout the entire plant. So you can see the effect of the pathogen all over the plant. So then it is called systematic or systemic. That is, the pathogen has spread all over the plant. It could also spread on the leaves, over the stem, over the bark, right, petiole, roots, everything. So it infects everything of a plant, every part of a plant. Then it is called systemic plant disease. Now, again, there is another criteria on which the plant disease can be divided. This is on the basis of organs they attack. Now, this is very simple. So, which organ the pathogen attacks, based on that, it could be root disease that infects roots, it could be shoot disease that infects shoots, it could be fruit disease where the pathogen infects fruits. It could be foliage disease where the pathogen infects leaves or foliage of the plant. So I think this is very simple. No explanation is needed in this case. So we move to our next criteria, which is on the basis of the host plant. This is again very simple, where the bifurcation is made on the basis of the type of host plant that the pathogen infects. These are cereal diseases. So this leads to infection of cereal plants. Vegetable diseases where the pathogen infect vegetable plants. Fruit diseases where the pathogen infects fruit plants. Forest diseases where the pathogen infects forest trees or forest plants. Ornamental diseases where the pathogen infects ornamental plants, right? So again, this is also a very simple bifurcation. You can understand even by having a look into it, right? So then, moving to our last part of plant diseases, this is on the basis of pathogen generation. This bifurcation is on the basis of pathogen generation, where pathogen generation here is means life cycle. That is, on the basis of life cycle, the disease can be divided into monocyclic disease, polycyclic disease, and polyatic disease. Now, what is monocyclic disease is where the pathogen has only one generation in one cropping season, which means that when the cropping season will come, where the when the favorable season will come, the pathogen, that is for example fungal spores, they will have only one generation, that is only one cycle of infection. They will infect the particular host during one cropping season only one time. So there is only one cycle that they will complete. So that is called monocyclic disease. Similarly, polycyclic disease. Okay, an example of monocyclic disease is loose smut of wheat. So loose smut of wheat will has the pathogen. That pathogen will only infect wheat, right, once only, and during the cropping season. So during one cropping season of wheat, it will infect the wheat plant only in one cycle, right? So this is monocyclic diseases. Now coming to polycyclic diseases, these are pathogen where they have many generations in one cropping season. So, in contrary to monocyclic diseases, in polycyclic diseases, in one cropping season, when the favorable condition is obtained, the pathogen will have many cycles of infection. So, it will keep on continuing infecting the plant. It can have maybe one, maybe two cycles, maybe three cycles, or more than that, maybe 5 or 6 infection cycles, which will keep on continuing throughout the cropping season, right? So this is polycyclic disease, and an example of this is late blight of potato. So that means that late blight of potato, which is caused by the pathogen Phytophthora infestans, right? So Phytophthora infestans will keep on continuing its generation, keep on continuing the infection cycle, um, to the date till when cropping season will be available. So this is called polycyclic disease. Now, let us understand what is polyatic disease. Polyatic disease are polycyclic but complete in but they complete their life cycle in more than an year or many years. So polyatic disease is actually caused by a pathogen that have polycyclic um, generation. That is, the pathogens here are polycyclic, that is, they have many generations in single cropping season, but they complete their cycle in maybe 1 year or maybe many years. So their cycle does not end in a cropping season. Their cycle will go, their infection cycle will keep on continuing for 1 year or for maybe many years, and therefore they are called polyatic disease, though they are polycyclic pathogen, but their infection cycle continues for years. So then it is called polyatic disease. Example of this is cedar apple rust, right? So this is about on the basis of pathogen generation or pathogen life cycle. Now we move to our last bifurcation, which is on the basis of symptoms. Now on the basis of symptoms, these are divided into the following types. These are rust, smuts, rots, blights, leaf spot, canker, wilt, downy mildews, powdery mildews, and anthracnose. So all these are various kinds of symptoms that appears over the part of plants in various ways. So symptoms are signs that shows that something is wrong in the plant, or based on that those symptoms, plant diseases can be divided. But we are not going to explain about these symptoms right now, because we have a totally different topic about symptoms of plant diseases. So we will be continuing that in different lecture. So for now, just remember this bifurcations, right? So that is it about classification of plant diseases. I hope the concept is clear with you. So for now, we end the lecture, and I hope that all of you will clear your doubts regarding this lecture. I'll be back soon with the continuing topic of this unit. Till then, if you have any doubts, please contact me.